This is one of those stories that sits with you long after it ends. A woman who's given her whole life to a father who barely notices. And now, for the first time, she has a way out. But walking away from family isn't always that simple. Especially when guilt feels louder than freedom. Let's get into it.
My father drained my life. Now I have 1 week to decide if I leave him forever. I'm 28 and I've lived with my father every single day since my mother died. I tell people it's because of rent prices or the neighborhood or how close it is to work, but the truth is simpler and uglier. I stayed because I couldn't leave him. Not wouldn't. Couldn't. When I was a kid, he was already tired. Tired from life, from work, from something no one ever really named. He was never violent, never the type to hit or break things. But his silence could fill a room like smoke. He drank. Not loud drinking, not the kind that smashes bottles, just the steady kind. Quiet, constant, gray. My mother used to smile through it, make little jokes, call him Grumbly Bear, and pretend his moods were weather patterns, not choices. She worked, she cleaned, she did everything. I watched her carry the weight of 3 people on her back until it broke her. I was 18 when she died. Some sort of infection that spread too fast. I barely made it to the hospital before it was over. She smiled at me once and then she was gone. After that, my father crumbled inward. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just deeper into the couch, into the bottle, into himself. The house fell quiet. I got a job at a call center, told myself I'd go to college later, when things calmed down. But they never did. 1 year bled into the next. He never asked me for help. But he never tried to help himself either. The groceries showed up because I bought them. The bills got paid because I worked. The house stayed standing because I made sure it didn't fall apart. And all the while, he sat. Not cruel, not grateful, just there. A shadow with a name. Friends disappeared. First, slowly, then all at once. They stopped inviting me out. I always had excuses anyway. I'm tired, I have errands. Dad's not feeling well. The truth was, I just couldn't leave. Even for a night. Something in me felt like if I did, something would break. Maybe me. Maybe him. Maybe the house itself. I don't know when the resentment started. Maybe year 2. Maybe 5. It didn't show up like anger. It came in like dust. Subtle. Constant. Filling the corners of everything. I started dreading the sound of him clearing his throat, the clink of the bottle, the slow shuffle of his slippers. I'd come home from a 12-hour shift and find dishes in the sink, crumbs on the floor, the same man in the same spot watching the same show, asking if I could grab him another beer. And I'd do it. I always did. Because I'm a good daughter. That's what I told myself. I'm a good daughter. And then, last week, something changed. I got called into the manager's office. Thought I was in trouble. But instead, they offered me something. A promotion. A transfer. A move. A real position in a better office, 3 states away. Better pay. Paid training. And for the first time in 10 years, the world cracked open a little. I smiled. I said I'd think about it. I walked out of that office with my heart racing like I'd done something dangerous. Like I'd cheated on a secret vow. And then I went home. And he was there, same chair. Same bottle. Same silence. He looked up at me and said, "We're out of bread." And that was it. No how was your day, no what's new, just bread. And I stood there, frozen, thinking how insane it was that someone could be your parent and still know nothing about your life. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and went to my room. Closed the door, locked it, and sat on the floor in the dark for almost an hour. That night I dreamed of walking down a street with no houses, just air, space, sun. And I didn't feel guilty for breathing. I didn't tell him about the promotion, not that night, not the next morning. I kept it folded up like a secret note in the back of my mind, afraid that if I said it out loud it would vanish. Or worse, it wouldn't. I watched him more closely after that. How he scratched his neck absent-mindedly while watching TV. How he sighed whenever I opened the fridge like I was doing it too loud. How he never looked me in the eye anymore, not really. I tried to imagine the conversation in my head. Dad, I got offered a new job. I'd have to move. It would be good for me. I waited for the imaginary version of him to say something like, I'm proud of you, or even just okay. But instead, I could only picture the blank stare, the disappointment, the quiet, selfish, oh. What am I supposed to do then? Because that's how it's always been. Every choice I've ever made had to pass through him first, even the ones I never voiced. I started noticing little things in the house that had always been there. The burn mark on the kitchen counter from when he dropped a cigarette in 2012. The stained spot on the hallway carpet from spilled bourbon. The crooked family photo where Mom looks tired and I'm trying too hard to smile. I wondered what it would feel like to never see any of it again. What it would feel like to rent an apartment that was just mine. A space where no one expected anything from me except the rent. A bathroom where no one left hair in the sink. A front door that opened into silence, not obligation. I let myself daydream in tiny bursts. 15 seconds while brushing my teeth. A flash while waiting for the bus. One night I even looked up the new city. Found pictures of the building I'd be working in. It was glass and steel and sunlight. It looked like a place where real people lived real lives, not like here, where time didn't move. And still I didn't say anything. Not to him, not to anyone. I went to work, I came home. I cooked, cleaned, paid bills, nodded, smiled. Every time I almost opened my mouth, something in me pulled back like a snapped wire. What if he panicked? What if he fell? What if he drank himself into a coma? What if he told me I was selfish? What if I believed him? Because somewhere deep down, beneath all the resentment and weariness, there's still that voice that says, you can't just leave your father. You can't abandon blood, even if blood abandoned you first. I started taking longer routes home, sitting in parking lots for no reason, just to delay walking back into that house. And every time I opened the door, there he was, in the same position, watching the same show. Like time only moved when I was looking away. Some nights I wanted to scream. Some nights I wanted to ask him why. Why he never tried. Why he let everything fall on me. Why he didn't care. But I knew the answer already. He never asked for help, because he didn't think he needed it. Because he saw my life as something inevitable. Something he was owed. I was the one who gave him that power. And now, after 10 years, I was finally realizing I could take it back. But that realization came with guilt so thick it made me nauseous. What kind of daughter imagines her father falling apart alone and feels relief? What kind of daughter counts down the days until she can breathe again? Me. That's the kind. And it scares me. Because I'm not sure anymore if I'm the person he broke or the person I let myself become. I started checking if he was breathing. Every night before I went to bed, I'd walk past the living room and hold my breath, just long enough to hear the rasp of his chest rising and falling. I told myself it was routine. Just precaution. But I think part of me was hoping one day it would be silent. Not out of cruelty. Out of mercy. For both of us. I kept the letter from work folded in my wallet. It felt radioactive. I'd open it sometimes just to remind myself that it was real, that there was something else out there, that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. And then I'd close it and stuff it away like a stolen cigarette. My life became a waiting room, waiting for the right moment to tell him, waiting for him to say something that would make it easier, waiting for courage I didn't think I had, until the fire. It was a Tuesday night. I came home late from work. We were short-staffed, and I stayed to help close. The bus was slow. The wind was sharp. I was tired in that way that lives in your bones. When I opened the front door, I smelled it immediately. Smoke. Not food. Not burnt toast. Real smoke. Thick. Chemical. Wrong. I dropped my bag and ran into the living room. He was on the couch, passed out, TV flickering, a lit cigarette smoldering in his fingers. The ashtray had tipped over. The blanket had caught. Flames were licking up the side of the armrest. I screamed. I don't even remember how I put it out. Water. Towels. My own hands. I burned my palm. Not badly. Just enough to sting for days. He didn't wake up until it was over. When he did, he looked around like nothing had happened, just blinked and muttered something about missing the end of the show. I sat on the floor shaking. My whole body was shaking. He looked at me like I was overreacting, asked why the floor was wet, asked if I'd gotten the milk he liked. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to scream so loud the windows shattered. But I didn't. I just nodded, got up, went to my room, locked the door, pressed my burned hand against the floor to cool it down. That night I didn't sleep. I watched the shadows crawl across the ceiling and wondered how close I'd just come to dying for a man who didn't even know I existed anymore. And I thought about the walls, the fire damage, the smoke stain already curling up the paint, and how I'd become that wall. Burned, ugly, and still here. I couldn't stop shaking. Not from fear. From something worse. Rage. Guilt. Grief. The realization that I had no one to blame but myself for staying. That I'd been watching myself rot for years and kept calling it love. I thought of the job. The new city. The clean walls and safe spaces and mornings without this weight. And then I thought of him, sitting alone, burning himself down one drink at a time. And I hated myself for hesitating. I hated myself for still caring. The next morning he didn't remember, said something about needing new slippers, said he hoped I didn't mind the smell. And I smiled. I smiled like I always do. But inside something cracked so deep it echoed. I looked at him and I didn't see a father. I saw a man-shaped coffin slowly collapsing under its own emptiness. And I knew that if I didn't leave soon, I'd burn with him. There's a calendar on the fridge with a red circle around next Friday. I marked it the day after the fire. That's the deadline. That's when I have to tell work whether I'm taking the promotion, whether I'm leaving, whether I'm starting over. 1 week, 7 days. That's all I have left. I've written the words 100 times in my head. Dad, I'm moving. I've been offered a better job. It's in another city. I think it's the right thing for me. I need to go. And then I rehearse what I'll say when he stares at me. When his mouth opens and closes without sound. When he realizes that for the first time, I'm choosing me. But I never make it past that moment. I freeze. I can't hear his response. Because there are too many. What if he says nothing? What if he says everything? What if he says he needs me? What if he says fine, go, and never looks at me again? What if I walk out the door and he dies? Alone. Slumped in that chair. What if he burns the whole place down and they find him days later and I'm the reason no one came sooner? What if I'm free and happy and still wake up every night choking on guilt? What if freedom isn't freedom at all? Just another name for abandonment. But then I think about staying, about watching him fade inch by inch until there's nothing left but his bones and my regret. I think about 5 more years in this house. 10. The way the walls seem to shrink every winter. The smell of the living room, where the burn mark still sits, like a bruise no one will acknowledge. I think about waking up at 40 and realizing I wasted every chance I ever had. I think about resentment hardening into something permanent. I think about turning into him. I think about slowly forgetting how to dream. And both options feel like grief. Both feel like betrayal. To him. To me. Some mornings I convince myself I'll stay. That this is what love looks like. That sometimes you don't get to leave. That blood is blood and duty is duty. That if I go, I'll be no better than the people who walked away from us before. Other mornings I pack a mental suitcase. I imagine the keys to a small apartment with white walls and no history. I picture coffee made just for me. I hear the silence and it doesn't scare me, it sings. I imagine breathing in a way I haven't done since I was 18. And then the day continues. I wipe crumbs. I restock the fridge. I buy more of the beer he likes. I pay the electric bill. I smile when he complains that the TV volume isn't right. And I wait. I wait for a sign. For a reason to go. For a reason to stay. I wait for someone to tell me what the right thing is. But no one's coming. No one else is in this story. It's just me. And him. And this house. And the sound of a clock ticking louder every day. I wish he would give me permission. I wish he would look at me and say, go. You've done enough. You deserve to live. But I know he won't. He doesn't even see that there's a choice. To him, I was never going to leave. I was the thing that stayed. The soft space that held his weight. And maybe that's all I've ever been. But I don't want to be that anymore. I want to be someone who gets to run. Who gets to want. Who gets to live a life that doesn't begin and end at his armchair. And yet every time I imagine saying the words out loud, something small inside me curls into itself like a dying leaf. Because I still remember being a little girl watching him fall apart and thinking, maybe I could fix him if I just stayed quiet long enough. Maybe I could be enough. And even now, even with the smoke still clinging to the ceiling, I still don't know how to stop trying. 1 week. That's what I have left. And I don't know which version of me will show up next Friday. The daughter who walks out the door. Or the one who locks it again. From the inside. I want to be brave. I want to be kind. But I don't know if I can be both. I don't know if anyone can. So I'll ask you. Because I don't have anyone else to ask. If you were me, if you had the chance to leave, but it meant leaving behind the one person who made you miserable and still made you care, what would you do? Would you choose your freedom? Or would you choose your father? Because I don't know which one is the bigger betrayal.
Thank you for staying with this story until the end. Some choices are too heavy to carry alone, and maybe that's why she told it. If you were sitting across from her right now, what advice would you give this woman with a heart split in half? Should she choose herself and take the road to freedom, knowing it might bring peace, or unbearable guilt if something goes wrong? Or should she stay out of duty, sacrificing her dreams, crying into her pillow each night while wondering what her life could have been? Do children owe their lives to the ones who raised them, even when that life no longer feels like their own? Let us know in the comments. See you next time.